Mystic is the Gerstlauer infinity coaster at Walibi Rhône-Alpes in southern France. The ride opened in 2019 and stands just over 100 feet tall, max speed 53 miles per hour, 3 inversions, and a short track length less than 2,000 feet long. However, it traverses a section of the ride twice. It actually has a really creative layout. It's not a complete circuit, but it's also not really a shuttle coaster. It's somewhere in between. I'm going to talk about everything that you can expect with this ride should you go out to Walibi Rhône-Alpes to experience it. I had the opportunity to get many laps in on this thing, including in both the front row and the back row, and I gotta largely credit that to them having a single rider line, which really came in handy. At the beginning of the day when Walibi Rhône-Alpes opens, everyone goes straight here, which is understandable. I mean, you have to drive past it to get into the park, and that vertical lift hill is just so imposing. We found that if you did the single rider line, you get on almost immediately. There are 12 passengers per train, 3 rows of 4 across, and it's lap bars only. Which is amazing because oftentimes when we talk about Gerstlauer coasters, a common reputation is that they're rough rides. When you have to deal with those over-the-shoulder restraints, you can really bang your head back and forth. But not only does Mystic have lap bars, which makes it super comfortable, but this is also a really smooth ride. If you've done like Monster at Adventureland or Hang Time at Knott's Berry Farm, it feels like that. It has a very similar restraint design. It rides really well. Maybe on the outer seats you have a little bit of a rattle, but it's not a big deal. I mean, the inner seats just feel glass smooth. And I love this station too as you're queuing up for this thing. Mystic as a whole has a voodoo theme. It's located in the New Orleans, like Louisiana section of the park. There's a lot of details here. You can see the shack that has all these voodoo dolls in it, like there's a witch doctor around here. It's really creepy. It's such a cool vibe. My favorite Easter egg is up on the wall. You can see Asterix and Obelix from Parc Asterix on display as voodoo dolls, which at first we thought was a dig at Parc Asterix, like they could be competitors. But at the time, I didn't realize that Walibi Rhône-Alpes and Parc Asterix are actually sister parks. They're owned by the same company. So it's not a dig, but it is a great reference to that park. I love it. When you roll out of the station, you start climbing up your vertical lift hill, staring straight up at the sky. As you crest over, you get an amazing view of the mountains out in front of you. The area surrounding Walibi Rhône-Alpes is absolutely beautiful, so I love that you get a sneak peek of that just before you get whipped downward. Now, interestingly enough, this is not a beyond vertical drop like what you get on many Gerstlauer coasters. It's almost the same idea as what you have on Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket, where you climb straight up, but you don't go straight down. But unlike Rip Ride Rocket, where that's disappointing, this drop is actually awesome. When you sit in the back, you just get thrown to the side, ejected out of your seat. I was really impressed. And the first element after that drop is this like twisted top hat. There's tons of airtime going over this, and the twists are so sudden. This is a really whippy experience. Whenever it throws an element at you, you just get tossed around. And it follows that up with just perfect zero-G floater air. This is Mystic's first inversion. You just rise up into it so gracefully. The way you just rotate around is perfection. As you start rising up back into the sky, you're then going to twist downward into inversion number 2. This is a dive loop. You don't get any airtime as you're rising up into the dive loop, but you do get suddenly thrust down towards the ground. Once again, really quickly. And pay attention to this section of track right here, because this is actually the final brake run. Everything after this element, you're soon going to be experiencing backwards. It's a really cool setup here. So you have this section of straight track to accommodate for the turntable. It's so quick, you're barely even going to notice it. There's a little wave turn right up against the lift, gives you a little bit of pop of airtime to the side. And then you have your inverted spike. So this is the furthest point of the layout. You start to invert and then it hangs you there. And as you're watching this footage, it doesn't look like the train actually goes that far up the spike, but when you're on it, you feel like you're going right up to the edge. You hang there for so long, it's kind of crazy. It's a wild sensation just dangling there. You just hang there and then you slowly start to descend backwards. You pass through that wave turn again, getting some backwards airtime, and then you turn into that brake section, pass slightly up into the pull out of that dive loop, and then fall forwards into a stop. It's a short backwards section, but still satisfying. I didn't get off it wishing that it was longer. Like, it felt like a very complete ride experience. And that's when your whole train is going to rotate to the left and then you pass back into the station. It's a very similar setup to Fury at Bobbejaanland if you've experienced that ride. That's another really unique, quirky Gerstlauer Infinity coaster, but I found myself enjoying this one more. I thought it was really re-rideable and a lot of fun. Interestingly enough though, it was not my favorite ride at Walibi Rhône-Alpes. I actually preferred their Gravity Group family coaster, Timber. which I did not expect. I thought this was going to be my favorite in the park. And when I say that, that's not really a dig at this ride. I just thought Timber was fantastic. But when I think about all the Gerstlauer Infinity coasters that I've experienced, I'd say this is like a very solid middle of the pack. Maybe on the lower end. But again, not because it's bad, but it's because Gerstlauer actually does some pretty good Infinity coasters. There's some strong contenders in there. So for Mystic's final score, I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. Very solid experience. I wouldn't say it's anything mind-blowing, but it's a good time. I was impressed by its tricks. It seemed like a really creative use of space, and every guest I saw getting off this thing had a big old smile on their face. And I also really quite enjoyed how Walibi Rhône-Alpes themed this thing up. Absolutely an underrated ride. So let me know down in the comments below if you've experienced Mystic at Walibi Rhône-Alpes in France, if you agree with the points that I brought up, if you think there's anything I left out. Be sure to post that below, and stay tuned for more here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.